I won't make you wait 2 hours to go potty.
That's the great first thing to be on our stream. Yay! Hello, everybody. Hang out. It's now live.
But don't worry. At some point during the broadcast, I will get up to let my dog go to the bathroom.
Oh, yikes. My camera has been falling. You just ate what?
Dinner.
Oh, wow. That seems like an ordinary thing to eat.
Yes, but I'm not going to make him wait for 2 hours after his dinner to go outside. So.
All right. Well, so this is talking about Survivor. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I'm here with my good friend, Mike Mayteen. I know you.
This is not a smooth opening.
Nope. Well, we're all over the place already, so.
It's a Friday night.
Yeah, and we're also we're going to talk about the Survivor Game Changers finale, but I want to just go ahead and petition CBS to not show the Survivor finale the week before Memorial Day anymore, ever again. Don't do that.
Simply because of Balticon, or?
Well, because of anything that might have people being out of town.
Yeah, like I didn't get to watch it until I made the mistake of it was Friday night. I was in Colorado at home, and when everybody sort of wound down and went to bed, it was maybe 10:30, and then I went through like a decision making. Oh, do I want to start it? Do I not? I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll just watch a little bit of it, just since it's going to be so long. Maybe I can take out some chunks of it. And so by the time I made that decision, it was maybe like 10:50, and then I started watching it, and I watched all the way until like halfway through the reunion show, and I just started like falling asleep at my computer, and I was like, it was like almost 1 a.m, and I'm like, or I guess it was probably because of with the commercials, I think it was like right at 1 a.m, and I'm like, this is not a good way to start my vacation. Like I'm gonna
see CBS, see what happens.
Yeah, you almost ruined my whole vacation.
Yeah. It's pretty inconsiderate of them, honestly.
No,
but
nonetheless,
we are now here to finally wrap up season 34 of Survivor, otherwise known as Game Changers. And honestly, a pretty successful season, I think. We had some interesting things happen here in the finale, and we're going to talk about it. Do you want to cover general impressions first, or just launch into the play-by-play?
I'd like to cover general impressions because I think I've wanted to say since I watched it, and part of why I stayed up is because this was a very satisfying end to the season. I got to give the producers probably a little bit of credit for the way they sort of unrolled it. But if you think back, like maybe 5 weeks ago, we started talking about like, Sarah's doing some interesting things. She's starting to set herself apart. Like if she can maintain that, she kind of slipped up here, but she could recover from this. And then, wow, she could win this if she continues to have this build. And that was really what it was a build, from a decision-making point, which again, she did do the actions, but I feel like this is one of their more masterful edits because I just felt like, you started off and you're kind of like, okay, they had the sort of the climactic turning point, depending how you want to define climax. Some people define it as when they're turning point into the end. Some define it as the end, however, but the turning point of her making a decision to start being active in the game and then that solidified into this idea that she was, being undercover and kind of putting her police honor and integrity aside to play this game. And that just the way that sort of crystallized and the way that she started to own it more and more and more was a crescendo into the end that she just absolutely nailed that final tribal council.
Yeah.
I mean, she owned that to the point where I was surprised, other than there was just some champions for Brad, like, that she didn't get a unanimous vote because of of how that all played out, and
Right.
it was
Well,
just fun to watch.
yeah, I was behind the curve on Sarah appreciation compared to you. I mean, I think you were cheerleader for her before I was, for sure. But I got there by the end. And
I think
I
that's what
agree
made it
with you.
interesting, though, is
Yeah.
it wasn't just this like hero edit. You know, it did leave some room for, yeah, but well, she kind of messed that up. I don't know. I'm not buying in yet. You know, and you know, I was sort of behind her, like you said, as a cheerleader, but it didn't feel like a done deal.
Right.
And you know, and she got better, and as it went along. Yeah.
For that matter, I think as early as or as recent as last week before the finale, we were saying things like, if Brad makes it to the end, he should win, just because of how hard it would be to get there. And yet that's not how we felt when that actually happened.
When he sat in that final tribal council, you already had a doubt that he could win. And then her performance in that final tribal council, I mean, there was no suspense for me. It would have been a massive disappointment of those contestants had she not won. You know, like I would have felt like betrayed by them being game changers with the way that like she owned all of that.
Right. Well, I mean, that's exactly too just the whole thing that made it so silly. Anytime earlier on, people would talk about like, oh yeah, you should bring Sandra to the end because they won't give her a $3 million. And it's like, what are you talking about? Of course they would. If she got to the end a third time, that's amazing. And she should win.
Yeah, they would respect. They would have sat up there and said, this is a game-changing season. This was a season of game changers, and Sandra has changed the game again by being in the finals a third time. Like, we are going to acknowledge that with our win. Like, absolutely, again, I would have been disappointed had Sandra made it and they had not given her the win because of how impossible that would have been. Yeah.
I'm trying to pull up the Wikipedia just so I'll have the like all the votes and stuff ready. I think that part of the problem, I think, with Brad is that he was always an intense competitor, and he had that like drive to want to win, and that's an admirable thing in many respects. But I think it started to sour a little bit towards the end, and he even
he made some poor decisions near the end.
Yeah, and I don't know that he would have won otherwise exactly, but for sure he might have gotten more votes otherwise than he did.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the whole thing of like, nobody wants to see people be mean to Ty ever. You know, it's just like, that's not a fun thing to see.
Yeah.
And kudos to him for being so upfront and just right off the bat in the reunion show of just saying, like, the first time the camera went to him was just like, I just want to say right off the bat, okay, everybody, I hated watching myself do that. That's not how I really feel. I got lost in the moment at the time, and I've apologized, and I just want to make it clear that I don't consider that okay.
Yeah, and you know, with him, you could sort of see that same thing, that like that also that slow build to this being like what this was a natural outcome to his, you know, what the beginning was him like in tears talking about like how he couldn't believe how Monica had made it this far, and like now he understands why it changed her because it's so hard like on you as a person. And you know, he's a genuinely good guy, but he's, you know, this was just a very difficult process.
He needed a Snickers.
He definitely needed a Snickers.
That was a good way to put it. I thought that was it feels weird to call a pop culture reference to a candy bar commercial eloquent, but in the sense that he conveyed the exact impression, like the exact meaning he wanted with a relatively small number of words. Perfect.
Yes.
And, and that's kind of what eloquent means. But it was funny. This is not really tied so much into the general thoughts, but when you were talking about the great job editing this season, if I made a face, it was only because the very first note in my play-by-play was a gripe about the editing of how, because they never talked to Troyzan, we forgot that he had the third idol. Because I remember the last episode we were talking about. So Ty has two. Is there a third one? I don't remember. Was there? I feel like there was maybe a third one. Who has it? I don't know. Maybe we're wrong.
Yeah,
it's Troyzan, and they just never talk to him, so it doesn't come up.
Which you're right. That was kind of odd.
Yeah, we had to be reminded in the finale.
Other things. I mean, come on. Troyzan he was so himself. In the final tribal council, he eventually at one point gets up and goes, "I'm out."
Yeah.
He sort of withdrew himself from competition.
I feel like that was almost like it. I couldn't. I almost wondered though, I had a moment when he did that, thinking to myself, if that's not reverse psychology, it should be. In the sense of the only thing he has going for him at that point is having friendships with people and people like him. And so he ought to be trying to work that instead of just sort of admitting that nobody cares about that. It's like he gave them permission to not even consider him.
Yeah, but that's that's just how he is. He's just kind of he's still just kind of going with the flow. And he does read the flow very well. He does have his finger on the pulse of the game. That, you got to give him that. That's why he's able to navigate so far.
Well, but
he's navigating the waters,
right,
but he doesn't play a winning game.
Well, see, but that's almost the reason that I wanted him to try to sell his own game a little better.
Is that that's not how he is. I mean,
yeah. It's kind of like some of the stuff with Ty, where it's like things that you actually like about him as a person still nonetheless make him a bad Survivor player.
Yes. Although, it's hard to call Troyzan he's a bad Survivor player to win.
Yeah. See, because it's like what always he is emblematic of why they went to Final 3 instead of a Final 2. Because too often what would happen is the Final 2 would be an interesting player and a boring player.
Right. It would have been him and whoever won that final immunity.
Yeah.
And that would have been blah,
Mm-hmm. And it too often was, and that's why they don't do that anymore.
Right, because this final tribal was, this was a reason, like you said, the reason why they went to 3 is we got to see two very different games, duke it out, two very strong personalities who are very well spoken, and which almost surprised me because Sarah, I don't mean this as an insult, but she just never she didn't ever strike me as being that persuasive and eloquent, in that, she always.
No, I agree.
Yeah, it didn't feel like that was her strength. And then to watch her just, own that moment, it was very satisfying. I was really proud of her. And Brad, we knew could do that. We've seen Brad, take that type of initiative in the past. So to watch them duke it out and ultimately feel like the right person won, was just, like I said, I that's the word I keep coming back to, is this was just a satisfying end. I just felt good that it ended like this, because it was fun, it was interesting. I feel like we didn't have some weird anomaly winner, someone who really played the best game from the time they decided to start, whenever they decided this is the moment when I'm going to go for end game.
Yeah.
I'm setting up checkmate right now. And then to see it come out as checkmate just felt awesome, especially against somebody as strong as Brad.
Yeah.
You know?
I feel like there were other players this season that if they had made it to the end, I think I would have been even happier with them as winner. But in terms of playing the hand you're dealt, talking about like, well, who actually made it to the end, Sarah is by far the clear winner. No question about it. And then that's how the game works, right?
Yeah, she managed the entire process very well. It was like, it's almost I'm trying to think who else has done that. Cochran's a little weird, but he does that really well too. Where the way that you kind of put the game into these blocks of, okay, at the beginning, you have to put out all these feelers and you got to kind of befriend everybody and you sort of stay under the radar and you go with flow. And then you have to have a decision point of, okay, now I'm going to start moving to end game.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to navigate that, because once you start that, now people start looking at you because you've now come above the radar.
Yeah.
And you have to make it to the end and then have the right people at the end with you and deliver the reasoning that why you played all those aspects. So to manage all three aspects of the game,
Mm-hmm.
and to literally change how you play in each moment was, like you said, there wasn't a lot of people in the season that I disliked. I thought they put a really good cast.
Oh yeah, I agree. Definitely. You mentioned the three aspects of the game, and so maybe it's a good opportunity to talk about the new format of the Tribal Council, the final Tribal Council. And I'll say that I did like the more open question and answer type of format, rather than everybody making their own statements separately. But I don't think that I like the separation of the three outlast, outwit, outplay pieces. That felt like an artificial separation to me that irritated me a little bit. But otherwise, I like the back and forth discussion format.
Yeah, I agree. And, I found myself, because the discussions were so good, I was falling out of paying attention to that, that, oh, we're in the outwit time frame. And then that's what made it feel kind of weird, is then you'd be like, okay, now we're going to talk about outplay. And it's like, oh yeah, I forgot. It's doing this weird thing. And then you'd sort of get back into the conversation. You're like, oh, now it's outlast. And you're like, oh, yeah, this is weird. Like you said, it felt artificial.
Right. Well, and then also they're trying to separate outwit, which is like strategy, from outlast, which is who you put on the jury. And I'm like, well, how is that different? Like, why are you trying to separate those things? And I mean, like, it's one thing, see, because Brad was kind of in the unfortunate position of his biggest selling point kind of being that he was able to brute force his way to the end by winning challenges. Which, good for him, but at the same time, I feel like that's less and less as years go by, a satisfying justification for why someone should win.
No, and it's not why he won. I mean, it's why he got Ozzy's vote. I mean, that's literally the only reason Ozzy voted for him.
Yeah. Well, it's because
that's how I played, and I'm hoping somebody could win that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. It didn't work for him. Didn't work for Brad.
And then you have Debbie also voting for him for reasons unknown, because she's weird.
She has a bizarre infatuation, I guess, with him.
Yeah, especially just because, there was actual discussion in the tribal council about how maybe he mistreated people, which ties back into like, well, when she was complaining that he was condescending to her, we can't help but think back of, well, okay, so now maybe we see a little bit of what maybe Debbie was talking about, except that now she's 100% on his side, wanting to defend him. Maybe because she's mad. She's also mad at Ty or something. Who knows?
Yeah, it was bizarre. And then Sierra, obviously, like,
Yeah, they were allies. It makes sense.
They were allies and friends, and that one made sense. So actually, now that we've unpacked that a little bit, I do understand why he did get the 3 votes, because all of those, well, other than Debbie's, but Ozzy and Sierra's votes make sense for him. So.
I wonder if. Yeah, I don't know. I guess we didn't really ever see Debbie and Sarah have any kind of real relationship of any kind, really, that I can recall.
Not that I know of, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe what happened there is just that Debbie kind of found herself wanting to vote for Brad just on the basis of having had more of a connection to him, and then worked it all up in her head to try to rationalize that decision.
Yeah, I find it hard to understand what her decision making. Lily, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Crawling on the ceiling, apparently.
No, it's stairs.
I know, it's just you're looking up in the corner like this. It's like
well. I don't know what you want, bud.
Dogs don't seem to understand the concept of playing to the camera. It's like anytime on 5 More Minutes where Luna's doing something, I decide to point the camera at her, and without exception, I point the camera at her, and all the people ever see is just her laying on the floor going.
Here he is now. I didn't call him to do that. He made that choice.
Well, you're talking about him. Acknowledgement.
Maybe I should run him, let him out the door, out to go to the bathroom real quick.
Okay. All right. So that's all right. So I think my frustration, I'm just going to continue on this discussion of splitting it up. I think my frustration there is just that even though that outwit, outplay, outlast element has always been kind of a part of the Survivor branding, they're not discrete things. And they all interact with each other in an interesting way, that it's not like with a dog show where you can separate the training behavior from the physical condition, where they are distinct things and one could be great and the other not, and neither influences the other in any direct way. In this one, it all ties into each other, because your strategy, if you are someone who can win a lot of challenges, your strategy is going to be different than if you're someone who knows you're not going to be able to compete at those challenges. So they tie in together. And then when you want to just say outlast is kind of just outwit again, or maybe it's outplay again if you last by winning challenges. So it's really just kind of that part of it felt forced. And so I wouldn't mind a bit if they keep the more open discussion format of the final tribal council, because so often the way those final tribal councils would go is it would always just end up being a thing of like, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so had interesting things to say, but then, we spent 3 people who just kind of didn't really ask anything meaningful, and we just kind of wasted screen time. Whereas if you make it more of a discussion, you're going to get to the meat more effectively, I think.
Yeah. I give him a little bit of slack just because it was the first time trying something new.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. There's probably a better way to handle that discussion and transition. I mean, they picked something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that type of a discussion is exactly the sort of thing. It's not like a challenge where you can have test runners do it, It's a discussion like that. I guess you could have producers have that kind of discussion, but, until you have the actual people there, you never know.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what they do next season. So.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and rewind back to the beginning of this finale episode. And my first note, as I mentioned already, was the recap reminds us that Troyzan has the third idol, and I'm annoyed because we had been thinking about that, but I couldn't remember, and I just realized, do we blame the producers or do we blame Troyzan for never saying anything interesting enough to merit being in a confessional?
It's probably a little of both. I mean, the producers good things to focus on. Other good things to focus on, and when Troyzan doesn't really command a lot of camera time, but at the same time,
I mean, that's why he got no votes, is because he kind of ended up not really doing anything interesting.
Right, but at the same time, it's like, man, come on, I feel like we could have been reminded at some other point,
Yeah. Anyway, but after we come back from tribal council, this is of course where this is the fallout of the whole disastrous move from Cirie. And Sarah feels betrayed because why wouldn't she? Because it's that's what happens when you have been betrayed. Even if it's a weird situation where someone betrays you for your own good, which actually kind of still doesn't feel good, even when but whatever. Anyway, Cirie's on damage control. There was the weirdness of Michaela saying, of Sarah saying that she targeted Michaela for being Cirie's right-hand man, so to speak. But at the same time, I'm like, but then why not vote out Cirie? That. Okay, we don't have to relitigate that whole.
We relived that whole. We did that whole thing about why. It was okay,
I guess I just felt like I wanted her to
votes for, and she kind of did want Cirie at the end, maybe.
Yeah, but I guess I was just frustrated because I felt like she was not able to just say that. But in any case. Let's not have that argument again, though.
No, and I'm just saying it is interesting though, because one of the things that we sort of, because of Sarah's command, performance of tribal council and all the other things we were talking about, one of the other things that I forget was very satisfying, which we're about to get to, is that Cirie didn't actually get voted out.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Right. So going back to just to backtrack on that one, so. You can understand why they wouldn't have targeted Cirie there, because no one was ever targeting Cirie, which would have been interesting had she ended up making it. But that's the game exists in this way. So
I think going into the finale, I was actually most in the mindset of wanting Cirie to win. I don't know that I could have put my finger on it before the finale. But I think going in, as I sat down and watched the finale, that's what I was feeling.
Well, and let's carry through. But I have some thoughts on that, and what's interesting about the way that all went down, and Cirie ending up being the one left without a chair. But let's get to that.
Sure.
Chronological, yeah.
Yeah, so we have Cirie in damage control, but she's kind of frustrated because she really actually was trying to help Sarah and is frustrated that she's not able to persuade her of that, or at least not initially. Right. But then Ty, because he is Ty, Sarah is almost going to him to just get backup for why he would never do what Cirie is saying that he did. And he initially starts to lie and then just can't even keep it up for more than a sentence and a half before just kind of looking down at his feet and then saying, okay, I'll tell you everything. I've been lying to everybody all this time.
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody. I'm totally untrustworthy and I've been working all of you. Now I feel better. And everyone else is just sitting there going, What? What did you just do?
Right, this is what basically set Brad off.
Yeah. Well, it's like. So we can certainly understand, the clips of Ty being very emotional in the preview from last time, and it's one of those things where it's like, Ty, you did it to yourself, but to some extent, it's hard to like. It's just that same thing that we keep saying about Ty, or at least that I keep saying about Ty, just in the sense of he told himself that to play the game better, he was going to try lying to everybody, but it was just such a foreign behavior to him that he's just bad at it, and it makes him feel bad, and then he caves and even ruins whatever benefit that it would have gotten him. Like, there's a lot of people he was lying to that didn't figure it out until he just spilled his guts. Yeah. But so that was kind of an amazing scene when all of a sudden he just confesses to everything, and Sarah is just immediately like, oh, okay then. Well, then, Suri, I apologize to you because obviously you were telling me the truth after all. Even though she's apparently still mad because, I mean, again, it's what we talked about last time in the sense of like, even if you were trying to helping me by going behind my back and using my advantage against my will just because you couldn't persuade me, that's maybe not the help that I want from an ally, even if your intentions were good. Which is fair.
Right.
But this is where everybody transfers their anger to Ty. Ty is desperate now.
Because what they've been doing, like, they all kind of knew that Ty had done these things to them.
Yeah.
Like, Brad knew that Ty was part of getting rid of Sierra and all these things.
Yeah.
And then when he admits it, it's like, like you're talking about, like, Troy's not giving permission. He essentially gave them permission to blame him for all of the things that he had done.
Yeah.
That pissed them off.
Exactly. It was a show of weakness in a situation where everybody is desperate to point the finger at someone.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of alphas in this group.
Yeah.
And so when you show that weakness, it's like,
Well, right. Yeah, exactly. And so did not go well. So now that he's desperate, he decides to tell Brad about his idols. And it was interesting that he kind of talks about how he was considering telling Brad and Sarah at the same time. And then I love having Brad just immediately say, let's not tell Sarah. She's mad at you. You don't want to tell her. She's mad at you. Let's have it so you only tell me. How about that?
Yeah. And then I have this other idea.
Yeah.
Now you give me one.
Right. And especially since Brad is telling the camera also that, like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to turn it around on him. Like, there's not even, yeah. Well, and that's what he should do, except that the problem is, as viewers also don't want to see people be mean to Ty. Right. Ty's all sad because he's a bad liar, and now people are going to bully him around. That's not fun. That makes me not like Brad as much. Now, again, it's like, I forgive him. I understand what's happening. He needed a Snickers. But at the same time, watching him act this way to Ty is not a fun thing, and it made me not want Brad to win.
Yeah, and it made a lot of people not want Brad to win, and that's why I think, going back to your earlier point, like, it was great that Brad owned it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'll talk about the other parts of the. Well, there's another part with Brad before he owned it, and the reunion show that we'll get to when we get there.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, at the same time, I think everybody can relate to having snapped at someone or been unreasonable because you were hungry or in a bad mood or had a headache or something like that. I mean, it happens, but it's also, like, you nonetheless still have to own your behavior. Like, it's only forgivable if you make amends to it, right. Which he did, but not within the context of the game, only after. So, yeah.
Well,
Let's
so then we go to the Mousetrap Challenge.
Big Maze. They had two big fun challenges in this finale, and I think that part of the going into the finale with so many people was part of what produced having two big challenges. Because I think otherwise the other big one, like this first big one, might have otherwise been the last challenge before the finale.
Right. You can start to see like why, even starting this at 11 p.m. at night, like how the pacing of this finale was pretty awesome.
It rockets along. I mean, they had to because they're eliminating one more person than normal.
Exactly. But yeah, so you just sort of like, you're just kind of like, oh, wow. Okay. So all right. I'm just kind of getting settled into it. Brad's bullying Ty. That sucks. Oh, this is a pretty cool challenge. And then of course the next tribal council we get to, and then, oh, hey, this is a really cool challenge. And then and it just keeps like, after every one, you're like, oh, I'll just go a few minutes longer. And it just like gets to the next, interesting part, like so fast. It was fun. Like I said, satisfying.
Yeah. So it was for immunity and reward. My note includes a typo where I say that the reward is Chicken Park instead of Chicken Parm. I still vaguely think of it as weird when people say chicken parm instead of just actually saying Parmesan. Like, okay, I mean, I get it. It's not like I'm unclear on what they're trying to say, but it's also, Parmesan is not like a burdensome, hard to say word. Anyway, who cares?
I don't.
The notes I had about the challenge itself is, first of all, that net thing going down it seems like really dangerous, and they should maybe not have the challenge designed that way. Seemed like everybody fell down.
They've already done before. They were replicating.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying that it looks dangerous, and someone could get hurt doing that piece super easily, and like everybody who tried to go down it quickly fell.
Are you helicopter parenting Survivor?
I am helicopter parenting Survivor. I'm going to get out my phone and dial 9-1, and then if something happens, I'll dial 1 again.
Sometimes kids need to play on dangerous playgrounds.
Do they, though?
We'll save it for another time, but I actually read an amazing article in defense of like dangerous playground equipment.
I think there's a balance to be struck. For sure.
I think so too. But I thought this was, but it was a rhetorical piece, but it was really amazing. But we'll save it for another discussion.
Yeah. But so in any case, the other note that I had about this one is that we saw a lot of Ty just following Brad through the maze. And it occurred to me that because it has a puzzle at the end, that's not necessarily a bad strategy. If you think someone's going to be the fastest through the maze and you can just follow them through and then beat them at the puzzle, do the puzzle faster. If that's what you think you can do, then it's not necessarily a bad strategy.
No.
But it's also kind of the only circumstance in which it's not a bad strategy.
Right.
But in any case, though, we had, I don't know, it was a fairly even challenge up until Brad was struggling, and it turned out he had a missing piece in his bag, like he didn't get all the pieces out initially.
Yes.
But then,
Brad,
he won.
Brad wins.
Yeah, and he was able to pick two people to accompany him to get more reward, and he picks Troyzan because he hadn't had anything in a while, and then Sarah.
Which I thought this was funny. So I went back and kind of idly watched this again the other night, like while I was like cooking dinner and doing other things, just because I wanted to make sure, like having again watched it so late at night, that I was up to date on everything. And I thought there was a nice irony. I guess this is irony
that they kind of created the final three at that that meal?
Yeah, they talked about it. They talked about. I mean, it didn't go down the way they discussed, but it did end up being them.
Well, no one could have predicted that how Cirie goes out. I mean, that was just crazy.
Yeah, no, that
So we have Sarah talk a little bit with the camera in terms of being unsure who she would want to take to the end and who might even be willing to go with her to the end. Who would be willing to bring her. Troyzan talks about how like he and Brad are super tight. I feel like I'm in a good place, but I still have to be smart. And I was like, well, yeah, those are the right words. But basically what you have done is you have, you have pinned yourself to someone who's obviously going to get more votes than you. Which like is a sure way to get to the end and then lose, which is exactly what happened. And we've seen so many people end up doing that. I think, at a certain point you have to just kind of, I mean, you never want to completely retire a strategy and say that it could never possibly work, but I'm not sure that we have ever seen it work where someone's actual game plan is, I'm going to get to the finals and because I didn't do anything, nobody's mad at me, and therefore I win.
Yeah,
I mean,
that is not usually effective.
Yeah, the only times it's ever been anything like that is just when the other person is just obviously everybody's furious with them.
Yes, I mean the other thing though that I think is subtly lost in the way that Cirie went out is that Sarah received the most votes. But you only know that when you pay attention to the like exit to commercial, because they didn't read any votes.
Yeah.
So you have to pay attention when they're all voting.
Which just occurs to me. I bet we have the yeah, they do have on the Wikipedia. They do have what the cast votes were.
Right. So there's 3 for Sarah, 2 for Ty, 1 for Aubrey.
Yes.
So she would, even though they had this whole discussion, they were not intending to take her at this point. So that's why I asked the question, like, is it irony that they ended up, because when in watching it back and knowing how it played out, like it did feel ironic that they're talking about like final 3 and we're going to do this, and then like it wasn't just that Cirie went out in a weird way. It's like the other one, they all, planned on voting for. Although I guess it wasn't.
It was Cirie and Ty and Aubrey that voted for Sarah.
Right. So, yeah. So I guess you're right. No, it was. Now that makes sense. Now I didn't actually think about that. It wasn't the 2 of them that voted for her.
Yeah. Oddly enough, Brad and Troyzan didn't vote for the same people. Brad voted for Aubrey.
Votes because of Ty's idols still.
I think that was the plan, and then it just kind of all turned crazy. So I think you're right that that's what it was, or what it was going to be. That's what they
had thought was going to happen. The others were going to flip it on Sarah because they knew, she was starting to become a very strong player.
Yeah. Well, and we actually have Sarah remind everyone she has the legacy advantage, or not everyone, but I mean us. And she talks about still being mad at both Cirie and Ty, which is probably a part of why they decided to target her. That meaning if she was giving that impression. So, but she talks with Brad and Troyzan that Aubrey could still be a threat, but they want to make Ty play an idol, but then vote out Aubrey, which is just what we just talked about. And this is really where we see Brad get hardcore into just trying to tell Ty what to do. And it was kind of unpleasant to watch just because, we've kind of not thought of Brad as like a mean guy, but boy, he was really acting like a bully in these sequences.
Right. And that's the thing, like it ramped up. There was a crescendo to this, just like there was to Sarah's like strong play. Like you sort of see these little peaks and valleys of him, like kind of being but you forgive it because you're like, oh, well, Debbie's just being sensitive, and because the way they edit it, like, oh, well, he clearly didn't say that.
Well, and the thing
he was doing something that was poking her, and then you see him kind of be mean to Ty, and you're like, that was kind of shitty. But then this happens, and it kind of it escalates it,
Yeah. Well, and the thing is too that like it wasn't even coming from a good place. You know what I mean? It wasn't like even a tough love thing of saying, look, Ty, I really want to work with you, but if we're going to get this done, this is what needs to happen. Because we know that he really is actually just trying to get Ty to give him an idol so that he can vote him out.
Right. And this is, but this is part of what's interesting to us about Survivor and the way that, and I think we probably talk about this at the end of every season, every good season we talk about this, is that the interesting thing about Survivor is it strips you of all of the pretense in your personality. And so I'm not saying Brad's a bad guy. That's not what I'm getting at. But Brad has spent his whole life exploiting weaknesses. Like that was his job. Is identify the weakness, exploit it. Like that's what made him a good player. But he's not that. That's not how he runs his day-to-day life. But when you cut him down to his base with hunger and exhaustion and all these things, that's what he triggers into. And he saw a weakness and he went to exploit it. And that's why he felt so bad, because he's like he knows that's a part of his personality, but it's not supposed to be turned on actual weak people.
In some ways, without wanting to diminish the real condition, it's almost like a very subtle form of PTSD, I think, in the sense that, he's got so much experience behaving a certain way in a competitive context that the competition brings out that behavior here, even though the rest of the context is very different.
Yeah, I think that's a fair, like you said, if you put that subtle on it, that it's
Right. Yeah, I certainly don't want to equate it with people who really have, serious problems with PTSD. I'm not saying it's the same thing at all, but it's just in the sense that our brains, we develop mental patterns for how we respond to things and how we react to situations. And those patterns become instinctive and emotional and not necessarily subject to rational consideration before you enact them.
No, and honestly, to play at an elite level, you need that to be instinctual. Because you don't have time in the speed of a football game to sit and think. The idea is that you've conditioned yourself to, boom, we see. Here's what the defense looks like. Here's where the weakness is. Exploit it. Go. Oh, I see the weakness. Exploit it. Go.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Ties the weakness. Go. And it just autopiloted.
Yeah.
And yeah, it felt really uncomfortable watching it. But and that's why it was so great for him. Like once he had his Snickers,
to just immediately recognize it's like, boy, it's watching that was hard, because I can recognize now how inappropriate and kind of mean-spirited it not just comes across, but was in the moment.
Right, but in the moment, it's like it's literally like getting dressed for work for him.
Yeah.
That's just that. I mean, that's how mundane that has become in his life of exploiting weaknesses.
But I think his reaction to it in the end is something that is worth consideration, because so often, in our current internet age and all of that, people will say something that makes other people mad, and maybe they meant to make people mad, maybe they didn't, but you see a number of responses to it. And frequently, if someone immediately jumps on it and apologizes and says, clearly this was the wrong thing, it was not my intention, but I recognize that people took it the wrong way, and I want to apologize because it was not my intent to cause that hard feeling, and I'll try to do better in the future. And usually when someone does that, it diffuses everything pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But what is more common is that people say, what? That's not what I meant. You're stupid for saying that I tried to hurt your feelings, and I'm going to dig in my heels about it and say people get offended too easily, and PC culture is the problem. And it's like,
Ty's a snowflake.
Okay. Yeah. So in any case, what Brad did is to jump right on it and say, I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated Ty that way. I was wrong to do it, and I'm sorry. I try to do better every day. Clearly, I slipped up on that day, and I'll continue trying to do better. And that's how you ought to do it. Like if you end up, everyone's going to trip up sometimes, and
yeah, it made it a non-issue in the reunion show.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, okay, that happened. That sucked. I didn't like it. Let's move on to something else.
Well, and we definitely got the impression that they had mended that fence already privately, but it was also important to say it publicly because we, the viewers, are involved.
Right. This is a public, forum.
Yeah. So, let's see. So we had Brad's mistreatment of Ty, which makes Ty frustrated. So he goes to Aubrey for help. And she's skeptical because she's now in this situation of like, okay, Ty just kind of outed himself to everybody as a liar who's untrustworthy and makes irrational decisions based on emotion. And now he has come to me in tears wanting to change his vote because Brad was mean to him. I wish that my fate in the game did not depend on him. Now, that said, Cerie's in kind of the same boat. And what's interesting is the fact that like their plan would have worked if not for all of that Idol and the legacy stuff, turning it crazy.
Yep.
There's a moment in one of Ty's confessionals where he kind of laments that nobody else is in it for him. So he has to decide what's right for him. And there's a little bit of a like, well, yeah. What? Why would anyone else be? Think about what you're doing here. You're not here for them either, right? Right. You want to win too. You're not here to try to help someone else win. Why should they be trying to help you win? This should not be a revelation, but nonetheless, it's at the same time, he is certainly not wrong to observe that that's the case. I don't think that his tack in the tribal council was the best. The whole idea that's trying to spin, well, everybody's lying and it's only me that's getting heat for it. And the thing is, he's kind of right, because that's kind of what we talked about earlier, right? Is that everyone kind of just seized on him because he's the one that admitted weakness.
Right.
So everybody has been kind of doing this stuff, and not everybody's been getting criticized for it in the way that he has. But that's not like telling them that is not going to make them say, oh, of course you're right. Here's $1 million. Right,
so, and that's where I think there's two big points here that we've talked about a little bit. So I'll go quick.
Sure.
That number one is he gave them permission by admitting it to kind of come after that part of it. Just like you said with Troyzan, by saying that, oh, I didn't really do anything. I turned this over. Like he gave him permission to not vote for him. And the other is that, if you betray your own personality, there has to be, you almost have to have this sociopathic, I don't mean that in truly sociopathic, but the disconnect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because if it's at odds with who you really are, people see through that like that.
Well, yeah, we talked about it, with Brad in terms of it stripping away the stuff, but it's with Ty too. Like, he came this time determined that he was going to try to be the schemer and the liar this time, and he couldn't keep it up.
Right. And that's something that, like, being that, like, a lot of my job, like, is dealing with salespeople and things like that. Like, that's something that we try to train into people is, like, we're going to push you to do certain things that maybe are outside your comfort zone. But at the same time, like, we never want to have somebody are as a person. You have to be genuine. Like sales is hard because you kind of put yourself in this position to ask somebody to do something that maybe they weren't necessarily planning on doing. But in modern sales, we're not trying to trick anybody. We're trying to educate somebody on a way that, like, our product or our whatever can meet some need of theirs. So you also can't be disingenuous, and finding that balance is very tricky. And that's where if you try to be like an aggressive salesperson and a very direct salesperson, like aggressive salespeople are bad all the time. But a direct salesperson, and directness and is not in your personality, you will sound like an aggressive salesperson, and people will not take your recommendations, and it will sound false. It will ring false with them. So you have to kind of find how that works in their personality. So I think that's what, like, with Ty, he's basically being a bad salesperson on the idea of scheming, like, because it just doesn't fit with him.
Yeah.
And so it feels false the whole time,
Yeah. So we have Troyzan say that he thinks it's a 90% no that Ty could ever recover at this point. But again, this is like one of those weird discussions where you can't help but think, like, okay, but if you really thought that he was the one that for sure couldn't win, then why isn't everybody talking about taking him to the end?
Right. And at this point, I'm saying, and Troyzan, we've decided you are 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But so anyway, we have a lot of people saying the thing that they want other people to hear in order to try to make their plan work. And it's interesting, as we observed, that it would have been Cirie, Ty, and Aubrey voting out Sarah. That would have worked if not for all of the other pieces in play. Because, of course, Ty plays his idol for himself. So that would not have changed the outcome. Then he plays the second one for Aubrey, which also would not have changed the outcome. But then Sarah has her legacy advantage, which she would play regardless because it's the only time she can. So that's already turned it into everybody who received a vote is now immune. But then Troyzan also says, well, hey, let's get in on this party because we know now that 3 people are immune. And Brad is already immune because he won the challenge. So now Troyzan knows, well, it's me or Cirie. That's the only way it can be. So, of course, he should play his idol. It would be foolish not to. So he does, and it's that super strange scenario of Cirie, despite receiving no votes, is the only one who can be voted out because everyone else is immune. And it's just crazy. It's like I like Cirie, and I didn't actually want her to go out, but at the same time, I liked, at least kind of like she said, that at least she got to go out on a weird memorable fluke.
It's kind of fun,
Yeah, better than it being voted out in an ordinary way.
Right. So a couple things with this, thoughts I had on it are, number one, this shows like how Survivor, like, this is almost like a hyper, like, I don't even know how to describe it, like lens on like how Survivor has evolved. Like immunity idols and advantages and all these things are part of the game. And by Cirie never really working or using that part of the game, that's what ended up being her downfall here. You know, and I'm not saying like, I don't want to like parse out the specifics of it. You know, this because I'm trying to talk in like a hyper real sense. The fact that like everybody else had managed to find some way to be immune and it left her on the outs, regardless of what your game style is, this is something you need to pay attention to and something you need to go try and do. And it was unfortunate, you know, that happened, but you know.
But yeah, so it's nice though that there's recognition from Probst and everybody seems to be on board that Cirie's kind of special in the sense that like even from her first appearance, she always had this compelling arc, you know, getting up off the couch, that whole element of it, and then becoming such a memorable player. I think they said that it was like she was like second place for total number of days played or something like that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, so it's nice that they take a moment to kind of honor her as she goes out, especially because it was such a weird tribal council otherwise.
Right. Which brings me to my second point. I said there were a couple of thoughts that I had with this. So the first one being the idols are real. Like you gotta take that into account. Second is coming back to the producers and Probst and like all of that. Like the fact that they had a plan, or if they didn't, they made us feel like they had a plan for what would happen in this situation.
Yeah.
Because Cirie she received no votes.
Right.
So it could have been awkward. There could have been some other weird thing where it's like, oh, because Cirie got no votes, like now you're all available. And Brad, you don't have immunity anymore.
Yeah.
You know, this was just the right way to handle it. And I just respect, again, whoever made that call and knew that was, which I feel like, because it was in the moment, it was probably Probst.
Yeah, well, I think that they must have
him kind of step away and like have a discussion and him go to the producers and be like,
yeah. Well, and I am sure because this is something that in theory could have come up many, many times before and it just happens to not have come up. I'm sure that they had some like they've talked through all the contingencies in terms of just deciding what the interpretation of the rules ought to be. That's not to say that they maybe aren't, you know, willing to be flexible in the moment if something presents itself as a better option. But,
good on them if they had the contingency plan. If like it's almost like a really good sports official. Like when you get that one weird situation, but you know the rule, and so
it makes
everything
me think of
just
D&D, and being a dungeon master in D&D. Like this is just
to use a more nerdy one. Yeah, like I'm kidding.
But like just as a specific example that comes immediately to mind, I'm going to get even nerdier now. This was an example that came up of a while back in the So Many Levels stream where we had the bad guy trapped inside a spell that creates this force field dome over them. And this
doesn't sound nerdy at all.
Yeah, and the specific rule of this force field is that anything that, you know, nothing can penetrate it from outside, like no magic spells, no weapons, no anything. But then one of the players wants to cast a specific spell called Sacred Flame on them. And I'm like, well, no, it can't go through the dome. And she's saying, like, but the spell describes it from coming from above, and you've always let me cast it inside before. So it's like the spell knows what the ceiling is to come down from. And so why can't we make it come down inside the dome? And I'm like, sounds logical to me. Okay, yeah, it works.
It's all being lawyered.
Yeah. But that's kind of part of the fun of the game, in the sense of, like, in the moment, if something's a little complicated or a little messy, what's the more fun way? And it's like the TV show. It's like, what's the more interesting TV situation?
Yeah, and what's going to make it run the smoothest? Like, because what they don't want, and why, again, this is why Probst, like, other than like his dimples and his blue hats, like, why he makes so much money, because he is so good at making it feel smooth.
Yeah.
Like, he is very good, and I respect Chris Harrison on The Bachelor a lot too, and it's why these are the two, I feel these are the two longest running reality shows, because their hosts have remained with them, and what they do is they take an unscripted show and they are able to smooth out the parts that are, the anomalies. Like I said, like a good dungeon master, or like a good official in a game. When a strange rule comes up, and you just know it, and it just you just keep moving, and the game just keeps playing, and everybody feels confident that the right decision was made. Like, nobody, there was nobody on Twitter up in arms about, like, is that really the rule? Like, should Cirie have been gone? Like, no,
there were probably some, but yeah.
Probably some, but there's some Twitter is a strange universe.
Yeah.
But for the most part,
no, I think it definitely
accepted it as like, hey, okay, that's what happens. That sucks for Cirie. Let's move along, and
it was presented with confidence and sensitivity.
Yes. So just that navigation, and and like I said, I'm not going to try to divert into Bachelor, Bachelorette. I do watch that reality show because my wife likes it, and that's how I get to watch Survivors. Let her watch that, and so I watch it with her. But I've actually become for the same reason that we like this, from the social experimentation. Like, I watch it from that same level, which annoys the shit out of her, because she's like, why do you have to analyze everything? I'm like, that's the fun. That's the fun. And she's like, no, the fun is the drama. No. But to watch him navigate these, these now are emotional situations, just like here, obviously with the, the deprivation and all that. But for him to, keep it kind of moving along and make these decisions in the moment, to know when to go to the producers and know when to, he navigates it very well, and that's, again, why those are the two longest running reality shows. In my opinion, the host is a key piece in making that all work.
One thing that I thought was kind of fun, even though it's obvious to anyone who thinks about it, that Probst, of course, knows what the votes are before he pulls them out of the jar and reads them, right? Like, they're absolutely counted and placed in a specific order before he comes and reads the votes. Like, it's just common sense that that's how it would be done. But usually they don't, like, confirm that. But in this case, he says, without having opened the thing to read the votes, that Cirie did not receive any votes. So it was just kind of like a verbal confirmation of that, even though obviously it makes no sense that it would ever be any other way. But so in any case, I agree that the whole thing was handled really well. And I liked especially giving Cirie extra attention, because she deserves it.
So this was a quick discussion I had noted I wanted to have at some point, and I think just because, I went on this rant, but when Probst leaves, who replaces him that can actually maintain this show? Is it a former player? Because I think it probably is. Like, I think that's probably what they need to do.
Yeah, it's kind of like how sports stars become commentators.
That's how I'm feeling. Yeah, so to use this season, is Cochran, can he do that?
Maybe. I think he has the know-how. But yeah, anyone who goes on there is going to be different, right? But I agree that having, you don't necessarily need another player to have someone who knows what they're talking about, right? Although certainly former players are not only excuse me, going to already have an existing investment, but
And they'll be
also
able to
more
money.
memorable. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you just bring some random
you don't have
person.
you don't have to sell a new face.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, who are, like, let's just real quickly, like, think about some of the biggest personalities that could bring that. Like, Boston Rob, I don't think he could host the show.
Yeah, I don't think he'd want to.
I don't think he would want to. Cochran, I could see.
Yeah, I could see Cochran. That was actually one of the first names that came to my mind too. Partly just because he's the one that kind of keeps showing up in all of these reunion shows and stuff like that, even when he's not otherwise directly involved.
Like trying to like be a part of it, you know.
Yeah. He's staying in that space. I think part of it too, actually, though, is that he's writing for Hollywood Reporter, I think they said, right? So it seems plausible that he would be there because he's covering a finale for Hollywood Reporter. But
probably England to get the job when Probst is gone. Like that's part of what made me think of this, honestly.
Sure. No, I could see that. I don't know, like no one else comes immediately to mind except for like joke answers like Coach.
Right, like, none of those personalities can make it. Like none of the other big names, like
Philip.
Movies can't do it. Ozzy can't. Do it. Like, what's that?
Philip.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I know those joke answers, obviously.
And I'm trying to think if CBS has any other like big names from other hosted shows but I can't. I mean, like I feel like, you know, if they want to, like, Cochran, I think is
not a bad choice.
It's not a bad choice. It feels like kind of the favorite right now.
Yeah.
If he, you know, hones his craft at the Hollywood Reporter and sort of gets that journalistic style that is required to this, which I mean, that's how this is handled.
Yeah.
Is like a cable news show. You know, you're sort of moving everything along, you know, with an entertainment aspect to it. So, all right, settled. Cochran is the favorite.
All right.
Although, you know what, there probably is a Vegas line somewhere for.
Yeah. Well, for sure it must have come up the last time contract negotiations were up. You know, like there was a point, I think, a couple of years ago where there was question of how many more seasons might Probst do.
Yeah, and he agreed, I think, to go through 2020.
I don't remember the details, but certainly at the end of the reunion show this time, he didn't give the indication that he was going anywhere anytime soon.
No.
Yeah.
That's what I remember, though, is that I believe that it was...
That sounds plausible. I just don't remember the details too.
Or maybe it was 40 seasons. What are we on here? 30?
This was 34. This season was 34.
Maybe he agreed to like 40 seasons, which would be 6-3. That would probably be 2020. So... close.
Yep.
Anyway.
So in any case,
question that I wanted to talk about at some point. So
no, sure. No, that's an interesting question. I wonder if any of our viewers have additional suggestions. You should let us know if you do.
I would love to hear that.
Yeah. So in any case, let's. We also got the live bringing Cirie out for standing ovation right after the Tribal Council aired. And even specifically acknowledging how he usually doesn't single people out this way, but the moment was undeniable was the phrase he used, and I liked that.
It was like, don't try to cookie cutter, like own the parts that are interesting, you know?
Yeah. Yep. So we came back to the episode proper, just we're right back into a challenge. The pace of this episode is just like we said earlier, it's just speeding along. We've got the transporting balls with paddles, and I think it was Aubrey. I don't remember, but I just wrote a comment that was balls. Wow. I think Aubrey said it, but it was just I just said that. Yeah, it was just a funny sentence.
And I didn't go back and look this up, which is, you know, one of the pleasures and downfalls of our podcast.
Yeah.
Or whatever we call this. I specifically remember this is one that there was an advantage where you got to practice this a lot.
Yeah, and I think you're right.
Literally had nothing to it didn't impact it enough. So they just kind of scrapped that and like, I'll just throw everybody into it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and then who would have thought that
like Tony or somebody again? I remember like practicing it in the middle of the jungle for like hours.
I think that sounds right.
Yeah.
But and then Brad just comes in and just smokes everybody again, just like nobody was even close. And I couldn't help but just think, it's like, challenge that primarily requires manual dexterity and muscle control, and the professional athlete wins it.
Well, and again, as a quarterback too, so his hand-eye coordination, like that's just such a part of being able to throw an accurate pass. Because like if you just think about the sports science behind it, you have to identify a running speed and how you're going to throw the football so that the football ends up at the place where the guy who's running at what speed, and like that, there's just
that stuff is actually really interesting from a neurological perspective, but let's not open that can of worms. It is interesting nonetheless, though, that sometimes it makes, like, there's some logical explanation that makes sense for why one person would be the best at a given challenge or not, and then sometimes it works out that way and sometimes it doesn't, but this time it definitely did.
Yes.
And he also gets like super emotional at the end, saying that this one was for Monica. And like, I don't want to say that it was put on or manipulated exactly, but I did have a little bit of that instinct just because we hadn't heard anything up to that about, wait, why was this one for Monica? Like the others weren't?
I know. Did Monica make it to the end? I can't remember.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I thought that's what I thought, or at least how I felt.
Oh, okay. So maybe this is like this is the one that like where this is where she went out or something.
Than Monica. That's how I interpreted it. But again, as lazy as we are with this, I didn't look it up.
Yeah.
So.
That sounds right. That might make sense for why this one would be for Monica as opposed to any of the others. But I think at some point too, I kind of was making allowances for the idea that Brad is in an altered headspace, basically from here on out through the rest of the game, and so his emotions are not going to be processing in a normal way, pretty much throughout. Aubrey is worried because she's kind of like, yeah, Brad keeps winning. There's not really any sign that that's going to stop, and he doesn't want to work with me. So what are you going to do? She wants to make a move, and she needs numbers. And see, this is where it's unfortunate. Again, it's like what we talked about, is that I think Aubrey is a better player in the abstract than she played this season, because she starts trying to make moves here, but it's kind of too late. She should have started pushing for harder, more aggressive, assertive moves sooner. And who knows, maybe she would have gone out sooner if she did that, but she would have had it was too late by now.
Yeah, I mean, she was sort of left in this like doldrums, really, of like, well, she's really smart and can, make a good case, so we probably don't want her around, but also she's sort of forgettable. Like no one really had like a relationship with her other than Ty.
Yeah, well, I think that maybe
best.
I think maybe what she did this season was to focus more on, like, because part of her reputation from before was that she was like over paranoid and kind of high strung and hard to deal with, I think. Right?
Yeah.
And so it seems like she was maybe really focused on trying to maintain those social relationships, but like almost at the cost of playing more strategically earlier. And this was a situation ultimately where it kind of all just came down to, Brad, Troyzan, and Sarah got to decide whether they wanted it to be Ty or Aubrey. and none of those three were willing to move enough that it could change things. And, Sarah was presented again as kind of the middle vote there, but, from her perspective, I don't know that she made the wrong choice. I mean, obviously she won, right? So would she rather had Ty or Aubrey there at the end? I don't think so. Because Aubrey, of anyone there, is going to be the only one who has a chance at out talking her, right? And then Ty has the nice guy element to it, even if people were mad at him for lying or whatever. But he's like, too many people like him in general, and it's hard to speak against him without sounding mean.
Right. And I don't want to say I was frustrated, but Aubrey's choice to target Troyzan is her.
I think it was just because she knew that neither Brad nor Troyzan was even going to have a conversation with her, and Brad was immune, and so Ty and Sarah are the only people she can work with. So who's left?
I mean, she could work with Ty to target Sarah, considering Sarah had the most votes the last time. It just felt like a little bit of a miscalculation. But I'm not saying that there was a better answer. It didn't feel like that's who.
Well, but I mean, let's talk that out though. Aubrey and Ty vote for Sarah, and that's 2 against 3.
Oh, are we? Oh yeah, shit. We still are at 5, aren't we?
Yeah.
Never mind.
Well, I understand what you're saying in the sense that it feels like Troyzan is an unsatisfying target. But I think with the combination of people you had where Brad and Troyzan are a unit, this is exactly why it's smart to split up pairs as soon as you can. And it's why they were right to get rid of Sierra when they did.
No, yeah, so now you're right. Yeah, it probably would have made sense. Yeah, Aubrey's idea of splitting up the pair isn't so bad at that point because,
right.
we could have done that a while ago. Yeah.
So I think the idea of trying to get Sarah to swing over to you and Ty and vote out anyone, like Troyzan's the only one left at that point because Brad is immune, is not a bad plan, but we put ourselves in Sarah's shoes and she's thinking to herself, Troyzan's easy to beat at the end. Aubrey and Ty maybe not as easy. Why would I keep them?
Yeah, now that you reminded me of all that, that's a no-brainer for Sarah.
Yeah.
If your choice is Troyzan or Aubrey, you get rid of Aubrey. Even if you like Aubrey, think Aubrey could work with you in the next vote, now we are in true end game now. Get her out. She's the only one. She has way better a chance than Troyzan does to beat you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's one of those where it was really Aubrey's only shot. So I don't begrudge her taking it, but it was never going to happen because it was not the smart thing. It was really only helpful for her.
It was probably midnight, 12:30 a.m. when I was actually watching this and taking notes.
It's a lot of stuff to all these moving pieces. So there's the only reason it even kind of still seemed like it wasn't a foregone conclusion is because Brad was continuing to just really be obnoxious with Ty. I control this. I need to know you're going to vote the way I vote. And it's like, come on. Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, so Sarah frames it to the camera like it's still a decision. She hasn't made her mind up, but as we talked about, it's like if she would have been foolish to do anything else. So everyone knows it's about the final 3 now. Aubrey says, obviously 2 of the 3 are going to be Brad and Troyzan unless one of those 2 goes tonight, except that can't be Brad. So
it didn't happen. Yeah.
And then Troyzan's only pitch is that somehow he's like, maybe I'll win and I wouldn't pick Brad. And everyone's like, Yeah, I don't know. You're gonna win a challenge and not pick Brad? I'm not sure anyone believes you.
That would
I
have
don't
been
know.
interesting, but
Yeah, I mean, if he did win a challenge, suppose it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that he would definitely pick Brad. It would be kind of dumb for him to do so, honestly, depending on who's left, I guess, to choose from. Because I guess if he's choosing theoretically between, like, I don't know. In any case, though, weirdly, Troyzan is also the only person there who thinks that there's no one he can't beat in the end. And then Sarah actually points out that that's a weird thing to say because it's like he's arguing for them to not bring him further. I mean, seriously, it's like what, it's one thing when you get this weird inflection point in the game where you're trying to say, I'm not a threat, but also you're trying not to say in front of the jury that you don't deserve to win.
right.
So I think that that's what Troyzan was kind of trying to do, is to try to appear confident for the jury. But then Sarah is kind of like, are you trying to say we should bring you to the end or not? Because right now it sounds like you're saying you think you will win if we take you to the end, which is not an argument that inspires us to keep you, except in the sense that maybe because it shows a misunderstanding of how the game works, that we should. Anyway,
so,
though,
I feel like this was, one of the, the pieces in Sarah's crescendo into the win is that, she started here where she felt like she was confident in the way the vote was going to go.
Yeah.
And she's already playing the jury.
Mm-hmm.
And in a very direct and succinct and just really good way. Like, she's cutting Troyzan's like legs out from him when we're not even there yet.
Mm-hmm.
So her gameplay just started to just snowball downhill,
Wait, I'm sorry, I lost the snowball downhill. Sounds bad.
Yeah, no, because it picks up steam and it.
Yeah, no, okay, I guess I get it, but going downhill sounds bad.
Nintendo argument earlier. It's like the reverse. Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. Mixed metaphors.
Mixed metaphors. Yeah.
So in any case, I was kind of bummed to have Aubrey go out just because I like her. But again, when you look at it from the perspective of everyone else there, there's no other choice that makes any sense.
Right. And yeah, and I felt the same way. I was like, but for me, it was more like, I think you said this too. It's like, I wish Aubrey had played better to not be in this position.
Yeah.
Not that I don't think Aubrey should go home right now.
I think she's capable of making good moves and should have made one 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yes. Aubrey should have done what Sarah did and like actually taken control of this and moved it forward. But she was so nervous to because she tried it too early the last time and it didn't work for her,
Yeah.
So the timing is critical.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
So this, speaking of timing, it's time for the final immunity challenge.
Yep.
We just launch right into the next challenge right after the tribal council. So this was another fun obstacle challenge thing that, this along with the maze are neat. I always like the big production numbers. And again, Brad just kind of dominates it. Like Sarah's briefly on the lead very early on, but then just once Brad retakes the lead, he just like no one else even really comes close. So he wins his 5th individual immunity, which is a very small group of that record, but also not able to get any more because it's the last one. But that said, I mean, kudos to him. Like, even though I think everyone was kind of feeling a little bit sour about him at this point because of his behavior, it's certainly an accomplishment to be proud of, winning that many challenges. Especially since it really plays as, obviously he's in good physical shape. And, it's actually something that Ozzy brings up later, which is that you shouldn't discount someone's physical prowess as though like, well, obviously they're going to be good at challenge because they're in such good shape. And he's like, yeah, but that's like hard to be in that good a shape. You know, it takes work to do that. So like, don't pretend like that's somehow some like this automatic advantage that you didn't have to work for.
Right. Yeah.
And I thought that that was a good point, because I know that I had kind of been thinking to myself, like, not wanting to say it's not an accomplishment to win that many challenges, but more that, like, I don't think that feels like much of an argument for why someone should win. I feel like winning a lot of challenges gets you to the end, but is not the reason that you should win.
Which is fair, but to Ozzy's point, like you all brought it up earlier, it's like, oh, well, Brad won the challenge because he's a professional athlete. Like, you didn't say it like that, but
Yeah.
And it's like, well, okay, but does Brad not get credit for putting himself in the position of being a professional athlete and a good Survivor player?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, maybe he should.
Yeah.
So, that. But you're right. We do often discount that and say, oh, well, of course, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he's in such great physical shape. Of course he did well at the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but if we were to put all of this in the context of one of the three outwards, if he is outplaying by winning so many challenges, he is for sure not outwitting by saying, well, I'm going to send Ty home for betraying me. It's kind of like, oh, yeah, okay. All right, Brad. I think hindsight suggests that that was not the right answer.
Yeah, I mean, this I think is more of where Brad's, the culmination of Brad's like poor like play in this end game piece. Obviously, other than winning the challenges, this was the culmination of that because he bullied Ty, and then he voted out Ty. Like, the whole thing just like felt so shitty.
Well, especially in terms of if it comes down to, are you keeping Ty or are you keeping Sarah? I mean, I think in hindsight,
yeah.
Especially because Ty and Troyzan are going to have the same argument as each other. I mean, they're going to try to justify winning based on being a nice guy. And so if anyone is inclined to give that any weight at all, that's going to split the votes between them.
Right. And yeah, exactly. And like, I mean, how good of an argument is Ty really going to make at Tribal Council? Like, he's, that's just not.
It's going to be an emotional plea. That's all he's got.
Right. It's not going to be in his wheelhouse. So in this season, which is the Game Changers season, do you think they're going to respond to an emotional plea or a well-played game plea? Like, yeah.
No, because the only possible reason that you might think Sarah is the right person to bring is that you think that she's betrayed people and they'd be mad. Except that's exactly what we're just talking about, in the sense of, like, in a Game Changer season, you would hope that personally being bitter would not be the motivation most of these people on the jury are going to have. Pour myself some more soda here. So you would hope that people are going to be more respecting of good play,
right?
But no, or at least Brad made the wrong call here. And so at this point in the episode, before going into this these last couple of councils, my notes here says is, like, at this point I'm rooting for Sarah. She played well. There are others that I would rather have been in her spot, but if she wins, she definitely deserves it. And that was even before getting into where her really solid final Tribal Council defense kicked in. But then here's where, we have Troyzan.
I'm dealing with right now, by the way. Like, He's
Aw.
just sitting here staring at me. I don't know what he wants, so I guess I'll let him out again. So
He loves you.
I think he wants something. He doesn't do that if he just loves me. I can hear you.
That's all right. I'm just laughing because Luna is definitely a starer. When she stayed at other people's houses, like for a weekend or something like that, the people will comment to it. It's like Luna just stares at you all the time, and I'm like, yep, that's what she does.
Yeah, they want something.
Well, no, well, at least for Luna, I think it's the herding thing. It's the instinct is like, she's watching the herd, her pack. She's watching. She's making sure she's ready if anything's going to happen.
That's true. He's a cattle dog, so
yeah. So I think that's part of the instinct, at least for her. I don't know if every dog's going to be different anyway. But in any case,
but they all go to heaven, so
yeah, works out.
I'll have to get up again in a minute. I shut him outside, so he would just go do his business, but he'll scratch at the door in a minute. I'll let him in.
All right.
But onward we go.
Yeah. So here's where Brad just continues to dig, because we have Troyzan going to Brad and just saying, well, we know it's going to be Ty, so let's just tell him. And Brad's like, no, this is my island right now. I want to specifically give him hope and then let him down at tribal council. And it's like, there's literally not even any reason to do that except to be mean. Like, you're not even pitching it as we want to make sure he doesn't scramble and do something unpredictable, which is usually the only reason you justify a blindside.
Yeah, this was like, again, the crescendo of everything that he was doing, and you just watch it like go and just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're like, Brad, what are you doing? What do you do? Oh, well, you're gonna do this. Okay, yeah, Kofifi, sure, okay.
It's interesting you say that, just because I assumed Kofefe.
Oh.
Anyway, but we have Sarah here, though, in the same position she was with the previous vote, in the sense that, like, okay, well, she and Ty know that they could force a tie and have one or the other of them try to beat Troyzan at making fire. But Sarah is feeling like, well, A, I'm not necessarily great at making fire either, and B, even if that works, I'm choosing to have Ty in the end with me instead of Troyzan. Why would I do that? Yeah, so again, it's like, it makes sense that, like, they try to spin it up like there's some drama in terms of what might she decide. But I think that she is probably smart enough. Well, I don't know. See, because the thing is, her question, of course, is the possibility that they might decide to vote her out instead of Ty, which honestly is what they should have actually done. So her confidence that they weren't going to allowed her to make the right decision, which but she couldn't have known for sure.
Also smart enough, though, that she felt like she read them, and what they told her, she felt confident enough in to go with them.
Yeah.
So, there's that.
Yeah. So she actually talks about how she just needs to decide who she really wants to be at the end with. And she actually talks about, I wonder if Troy.
Let's back that up for a minute.
Okay.
She talks about who she wants to be at the end with, and she's not the one who's immune. Like, what a great, that's when you start to realize where this is going.
Right. And I think part of it is what you said, in the sense that she, I think, recognized the slightly irrational mindset that Brad had worked himself into. And that's, I think, maybe why she was able to be confident that he was planning to get out Ty, even though we can say that rationally that probably doesn't make the most sense.
Right. And honestly, like, in this day and age in Survivor, like, there's not going to be the Boston Rob, like, conglomerate where you can just pick people off to the point where you just win. You need to take advantage of the the lucky things that you get. So like the fact that you have this legacy advantage when everybody's about to vote you out. Boom. You ride that wave, you're done. Okay. And then you see Brad, zero in on Ty, and you're like, oh, well, yeah, shit. Like, get that off of me, and I get to decide. And to capitalize on those things, like, that's what you have to do in Survivor right now. You have to find when you have the advantage and just take it. And she really just did that through the whole end game,
Yeah. She did have one bit here that I kind of raised an eyebrow at just a little bit and I think honestly there wasn't a lot of weight behind it anyway because we know what decision she actually made. But she talks a little bit about the idea of wondering, could Troyzan actually win just on the virtue of not having made anyone mad? And it's a fair question to ask, even, that we've talked about already. But the thing that made me raise my eyebrow a little bit is when she said, like Sandra. And I'm like, that's not how Sandra won. Neither time was that how Sandra won.
Right.
Sandra was super schemer. Like she didn't win just because everyone said, oh, she's nice, we like her. She was a villain. That was like her whole reputation. So I thought it was a weird example to use when trying to speculate whether Troyzan could win by being nice. But, anyway, other than that, so my note here is actually like, honestly, for Sarah, I think it's a weird choice because Brad should eliminate Sarah, but we know that he's not planning to. So if she gets to pick to be at the end with Troyzan or Ty, it should probably be Troyzan. But a fire-making challenge versus letting Brad make the choice. And I wanted her to pick fire just because it's more interesting. But again, it's like just based on what Sarah should do for Sarah. Why risk it?
Yeah, I mean, she, like you said, this was probably the only time I was actually in suspense. Is I wasn't sure if they would go to fire or if they would go to fire or if she would side with them or if they would actually change their mind and go for her. What?
I thought you were saying something.
No,
so okay. So at the tribal council, we actually have Ty talk about Brad's treatment of him, and he weirdly kind of like digs deeper, and we actually see the jury reacting to Brad being kind of an asshole. Even there at the tribal council. Because there's basically Ty just saying like, yeah, he's just coming and dictating to me, and he's been really mean and aggressive about it, and he's basically just saying, yeah, it's tough love to get you to, so I can make you do what I want you to do. And like, everyone's like, well, okay, what are you trying to just what is it that you're wanting us to what response are you looking for from us there?
Like, hey, good job, winner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody loves when the football player picks on the skinny gay guy. Yeah. Anyway. I was really frustrated in my notes here with Brad just because I'm feeling like, in principle, I could have imagined myself rooting for him if not for his behavior in the finale.
I agree.
Yeah. So let's see. Ty's voted out. Troyzan gets a Friends for Life hug from Ty, and I liked that. We have, in the morning, we have everybody there, the final morning, and Troyzan does a really weird little, well, I'm emotional. No, I'm not crying. It's just the smoke thing. And I'm like, wait, is he joking? Or I guess, but it was a weird take. Like, I couldn't tell whether he was really trying to say that he wasn't crying or what.
He's kind of a weird dude. Like,
yeah.
His name is Troyzan.
Well, and the thing is, like, yeah, that was such a weird thing too that happened because on his first season there was a guy going by Tarzan, and then Troyzan was trying to say, but it's not because of that. It's because people actually call me Troyzan. It was like, really? Okay. Anyway,
which is probably true, and it was a weird casting decision to have two people who went by that nickname. Yeah. That was strange.
Yeah, and he's saying he's hopeful because he's been nice to everybody, and no one ever wrote his name down except for that one vote he got in the weird one with the. He got one when Aubrey was voted out. Aubrey's vote. But and my note though was just like, yeah, but all you did was hit yourself to Brad and never do anything else. Let's see. Okay.
You may know, Mowgli's watching some movie with like purple square-headed monsters. It's an animated movie. What this is?
Purple square-headed monsters don't ring a bell immediately.
Like small, like square heads, and they're purple. And I don't have the sound on, but he's very intense watching whatever this is, and I have no idea.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure either. But anyway.
I thought you would know quickly, but now it's digressed. Back to.
I actually had one last comment on Troyzan that was before Ty got voted out, where Troyzan was like, "Oh, this is the first news I'm hearing about a possibility of a tie," and I'm just thinking like, only because you're not paying attention and thinking through what the options are.
Yeah, there are 4 of you.
Yeah, exactly.
There is a chance.
I like that Probst actually kind of responded to that by saying, it's kind of basic strategy at this point. But in any case, though, this is where Sarah starts to really start formulating her pitch, so to speak, the idea of like, last time I was the police officer, this time I'm the criminal, and they're the police officers, and I have to, tell my story. And I thought that was kind of good stuff there. And then Brad continues to be arrogant. So yeah. And then so we start the final tribal council. We hear a little bit about the new format. We hear that Ozzy and Cirie are now number 1 and number 2 for most days of Survivor played. It's kind of neat.
It is kind of neat for both of them. I like them.
Especially for 2 such different players too. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's say, so as we start with this discussion, we're doing the outwit first. We have Zeke praising Sarah's ability to form relationships. He says he's going to be Sarah's champion, and specifically talks about managing to vote out Sierra and still get Will to the legacy advantage, which is still, I think, her MVP move of the season, honestly, just because that's like, it's just kind of it's impressive. It's
she recognizes that too. She owns that.
Yeah. Andrea says it's a little gross to praise someone who tricked them all, and I'm kind of feeling like I'm disappointed that Andrea would say it like that. I wanted to think of her as a little bit more of a strategic player who would recognize that as gameplay and not make it personal like that. But anyway, Sarah says her relationships are 100% real, and that earns laughter. Because it probably should, because I think that it's a little bit of it's not 100% true, because she's actually the whole rest of her pitch is that she's going undercover and she's spinning these stories, right? So like, it might be true that she actually does have warm feelings for all of them and didn't want to hurt them. So I think that's probably true, but yeah. Anyway, though, Ozzy says there are ways to play without going as low as she did. And I liked her answer, which was essentially to say, maybe for you, but I did what I had to do to get here. And I don't know that I could have been the camp provider or the person who wins 5 individual immunity challenges. I did what I had to do to be here. And you can say you don't have to go as low as I did, but look at where you are.
Again, I was so impressed with how she just owned all of that.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
It caught me off guard. Like, again, she had started to build up this confidence that you could see in her gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
But to see her, that takes some serious, balls. Let's just say it, to go after Ozzy
Mm-hmm.
in the tribal council and say, no, of course you could do it that way, but I can't. And
Mm-hmm.
this is what worked for me. And hey, I'm sitting here and you're not. That is.
Well, and I was irritated with Ozzy too, because he then turns to Brad and says, as a competitor, I give you props. That's fine. But then he says, you were able to get to the end without getting your hands dirty. And I'm like, no, he didn't.
No, he didn't.
How are his hands not dirty? They're totally dirty. He lied and betrayed people just as much as anyone else there did.
Right, which is why because of his lies and betrayals, he put himself in the position that he had to win them all the immunities.
Yeah. Like he would have been voted out way before if he had not won all those immunities, because he had revealed himself to everybody as a threat that needed to be eliminated.
Right.
But in any case, so I was annoyed with Ozzy for trying to pitch it that way, and then same for Debbie later, and especially in the context of how Brad behaved in this episode. The idea that Ozzy's going to support him because he didn't get his hands dirty, and I was like, no, I don't like that. I don't like that.
Ozzy supported him because he wanted Brad to win for the reasons that he's never won.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what it was.
He wants to think that someone playing the way he plays can win.
Can win. Yeah. Which, yeah.
Maybe, but hasn't. I don't know that it has happened yet.
Yep, not yet. So,
Suri asks Brad if it wasn't really Sierra that was the brains of the operation, running all of that, and I suspect that was at least partly true. Running the first portion of the game, and then he talks about previous alliances, and having made the relationships that allowed, for example, when JT came to him, that allowed him to save Sierra, and he tries to spin that as the game-changing moment of the season, which I certainly would. I think that's an overstatement, but he's right, at least that's a significant thing that he can say that he did, is that he had cultivated those relationships that allowed that whole thing to go down that way.
Yeah. There is a different narrative and outcome where Brad could absolutely win.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I might have been rooting for him if he hadn't been such a jerk in this episode.
And that, you have to imagine, you have to remember, Ty's on the jury. Mm-hmm. They talked about this in tribal councils. Mm-hmm. What happened did get to them.
Yeah. Well, and he doesn't even deny it. He tries to defend it, which, you can argue on one hand is well, you should own the things that you do. But some of the stuff that he was doing to Ty are really hard to really justify as actually being strategic and not just mean-spirited.
Right.
Because they weren't really. And honestly, it makes no sense to have kept Sarah and voted out Ty. Unless, I don't know, I think unless it's just a fundamental underestimation. There we go, of Sarah.
Underestimation.
Too many syllables. So let's see. We have Michaela saying that she always thought that Sierra was the brains also, and basically quizzes Brad on did you get to know me, and basically revealing you know the sort of stuff that I would have like in the first 3 lines of my resume, and that's like all you know. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah, that was awkward.
Yeah.
When like challenging, like, well, I know you, or when Michaela, sorry, when she was, and he was like, well, you're, and
He lists her home state, job, and school that she went to. That's what he specifically.
Absolutely real answers, but it might as well have been, you know.
Well, and especially when the context of the question is so obvious that she's trying to make the case that you didn't really try to get to know me, and just reciting biographical facts doesn't make the case. And it's probably because he can't make the case because he didn't try to get to know her. He found her irritating and avoided her.
Right, and he doesn't want to say that. Like,
yeah,
I got to know you real well. You were irritating, and I wanted to avoid you. that didn't play either.
No, but we get a no further questions, Your Honor. I like Michaela. Andrea talks about where Brad fell short was in forming personal relationships, which kind of follows up on what Michaela was saying, and talks about Sarah's like, well, how did you form those relationships even if you frequently betrayed them? And then this is where Ty has the biggest laugh of the final tribal council, which is like, wait a minute, what? You mean everybody else had that same experience where you thought you were super close with Sarah and then she betrayed you? And he seemed like genuinely surprised to realize that she had done that to everybody else too.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like, this is where you start to like we start to solidify where the wind's coming.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like,
yeah,
because you know they're not going to be bitter about that. Like they're genuinely impressed. As much as they like want to bitch about it, like they are genuinely impressed that she did that.
Right.
And
well,
when she go ahead.
Yeah. Well, then I was just going to say, and whether Andrea sort of meant to do this or not, it sets Sarah up for her basic logline synopsis of her defense, which is to say, last time I played like a cop and it got me nowhere. So this time I specifically gave myself permission to treat this as being undercover. And what that required me to do is to be able to shut this stuff on and off. It was a specific strategy that I planned from the beginning and then executed. And I understand how that can feel from the other side because I've seen it. But that's what I had to do to be sitting here. And I did it. And here I am. And it's like, and then Debbie gets up and rambles, is like, well, if the ends don't justify the means, then what does? And I'm like, wait, what? What?
Was what you
the ends do justify the means. That's exactly what she just said.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Was what you read off a direct quote, or was that?
Yes, that's what she said. If the ends don't justify the means, then what does?
No, not Debbie, Sarah's.
Oh, no, that was not verbatim. It was just my little paraphrase of what she said.
Yeah, because I felt like there was another part in there that I actually thought was key, and that she mentioned that she talked to, like, and I don't know if it was in this one or in another part of the conversation, but she talked to people that she knew at home and cops that she knew at home. And like, it wasn't that she specifically gave herself permission, but like this third party of law enforcement had given her permission to act this way, which I thought was actually really powerful. Not just that it happened, but the fact that she brought that up. Like,
yeah, no, that's a good point because, first of all, it shows a thoughtfulness in terms of the strategy to begin with, but also an indication that there are people who she actually values their opinion and trusts what they have to say and wouldn't want them seeing her act this way without knowing that it's strategy and not just being a liar.
Well, and there's also the point to the jury that, this isn't just me trying to tell you this. Like, you're invoking other cops, other law enforcement, and they're giving you this backing of like why you should win without them ever actually having to show up or say anything.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, you get this weight that's helps make sure you get some votes. I mean, it's a good strategy because it's honest, but also it's a good strategy.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up because I agree it was a good point to make in her whole summation. I had a few more notes about the stuff that Debbie was rambling about, but like she's zero respect for Sarah's gameplay, names chicks Machiavelli and someone else similar theme. She's also rooting for Brad. She tries to jump onto Ozzy's cheerleader, military captain, whatever the hell that was, metaphor. Also rooting for Brad. She gets some great reaction shots from Michaela while she's doing all of that. Michaela obviously going like, "You're spouting nonsense right now. You don't even make any sense." I still just like I actually wrote it down in quotes though, that bit of if the ends don't justify the means, then what does, with this tone like I've just said something like I've just checkmated you. And I'm like, that sentence does not make sense, especially given that what she just said was that the ends do justify the means. That was the whole thrust of her point that she said right before you started talking. Which, you know, was the idea of I did what I had to do to get here and it worked. Here I am.
Yep.
If the ends don't justify the means, then what does? It's like they do, and they do. So like your question is meaningless. And I don't think you're even asking what you think you're asking. But in any case, yeah, so she's annoying and we don't have to talk about her anymore.
No, I don't want to.
Yeah. I liked Michaela being very frank, as she always is, about just saying, everybody who's talking about the emotional feelings tied into all of this, I think that's all kind of a put on, and it's not what we should be talking about here. And she decides to just ask Troyzan, like, what did you even do in the social game? He rambles a bit. Even Ozzy kind of gives him some heat in terms of saying, well, yeah, but were you just a passenger or were you being the driver? And he tries to say, well, I got to where I am by aligning myself with the right people and doing what they want. And it's like,
I was just a really, really good passenger.
Yeah. I made sure they were very certain that they could trust me to not take any votes away from them in the end. Although I did like that Sierra stuck up for him a little bit in the sense that of saying that, like, when we were having strategy discussions, you participated more than most other people were aware of. But that's like the best thing that anyone can say about what his gameplay was.
That's sort of his problem, is that he doesn't own that. Like, he's not an idiot. Like, you know, he has navigated it this far a few times because he's not stupid, but he doesn't like.
I mean, he maybe could have had a better sales pitch for his play, except he miscalculated in assuming that anyone was going to respond to this idea that just he didn't make anyone mad and that's why he should win.
Right.
That's not a winning strategy and hasn't been really ever.
No, and when you have two, again, we talked about earlier, like there's some alphas in here. Like Sarah and Brad are alphas.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're like just going at it and defending and shooting each other down and you down, like he's not equipped to defend that. And that's why he stands up and he's like, man, like I just don't. I mean, this is too intense, man. I'm out. Like, I'd rather not win $1 million.
Yeah, I think he just recognized how little traction he was getting with anything he said.
Right, which is part of why he can get so far in the game, is that he recognizes slowly where things are. He's not proactive with anything. He doesn't know how to control it. But he's not obtuse to what is happening.
His strategy can be summed up as don't make waves ever.
Right. And when you see waves, ride
try
them.
to stabilize, or I was going to say try to stabilize them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I mean, you're probably right in the sense that, like there were times where he, was able to adapt to changing situations.
Yeah.
Only in context of
guides waves.
Yeah.
But he can't make them or capitalize on them or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Andrea asks Brad about how he didn't seem to ever get along with the people who were on the bottom, and whoever was kind of on the outs always definitely knew it because he didn't relate well to them, and Michaela and Ty in particular. He defends that he and Michaela were just oil and water, which, I mean, fair. A lot of people didn't like Michaela very much in terms of being able to just get along with her.
Yeah.
But then he pretty much just defends bullying Ty as well, yeah, I just wanted to use my position of strength to manipulate him into doing what I wanted. And everyone's like, yeah, that's kind of what we're saying is not cool. Well, yeah. but it worked. And it's like, yeah, but you're not understanding the point of our criticism here.
Yeah. We understand it worked. That wasn't what we're not responding well to that.
Haley actually sort of perks up with that. Is like, are you saying you used condescension as a strategy? And my note is, he says no, but yeah, kinda. And then of course Debbie defends the testosterone because that's how boys will be boys or something.
Okay, that was all weird.
Yeah. Well, she's just nothing she was saying made any sense.
Nope.
But then Zeke comes down and he kind of finishes up this little segment of basically saying, listen, everyone, Sarah was always in the driver's seat. She was on the right side of every vote. She's obviously the one that knew what she was doing from the strategic sense of the game. And it's a fairly convincing argument, which I think is why she won. But then we get to the outplay section, which again is just okay, well, what is there to talk about though? Because Ozzy said, this is where Ozzy had a good point of saying, well, obviously this belongs to Brad. He won so many challenges, and people don't understand the work that's required to be in that shape, which is a fair point. And then Debbie says that the others wouldn't be there without him. And it's well, I mean, that's not, well, Troyzan maybe. But then Sarah is defending that well, yeah, okay, so he's a professional athlete. He worked with the tools that he had. I had to work with the tools that I had. I can't compete against the professional athlete as a challenge winner. I have to do my own thing. And she brings up at this point the attention to detail. I had to find the tools, that secret advantage that was at Michaela's feet. And I'm the one that saw it. Everybody else was there too. Anybody could have seen it, but I was the one who did. And then I got it. And then I used it when I needed it, and it worked perfectly.
Right. When I was going to get it, which she didn't say, but
Well, I guess technically that was the legacy advantage that she used, the one where Siri ended up going out. The secret advantage of the extra vote wasn't as effective. But it was the legacy advantage that she used this time when Siri went out.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, the point of getting the secret advantage when anyone else could have, but it was her that spotted it. And I mean, that's and I liked Michaela really being the cheerleader for that, even though it's kind of in theory, you could imagine it being embarrassing to her that she didn't spot it when it was at her feet.
No, which is why, you can see why in the casting of the show, when Michaela has a Snickers, she's really funny and smart and compelling.
Mm-hmm.
And not that she isn't when she's in the show, but like she becomes, like we've talked about this before with people who can be funny.
Yeah.
When you start to debase them a little bit, the humor turns a little nasty.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of the problem with her is that she just wears her emotions on her sleeve to an extent that it's very difficult for her to disguise her reactions when people say things she doesn't like.
Right. So when she's in a good spot, like she's incredibly like articulate and interesting. Like you can see that why they're compelled to keep wanting her on the show. And I mean, and she's not bad on the show either, but like you see when she's rested,
Yeah.
she's, you know, at such a higher level.
I will thank her forever for just the final tribal council moment where she specifically poured some water into a mug so she could be drinking it when they read the final votes.
Yes, like that's funny. Great. It's better
It's
than
like the be more tea meme with Kermit drinking the tea. You know, I mean, it's kind of
pouring out the rice. Like it's way better than that.
Yeah, so great. So that's really all we have though for the outplay bit. And then the outlast bit again is like it's not clear what you talk about there that isn't kind of already covered. And then Brad basically like, well, I had strategy until my strategy failed, and then I just had to win all the challenges. And but I did. So it's like, I mean, you have to give him credit for that, but the credit for that is what gets him to the end. Like that's not. I feel like that's the reward for winning the challenges is being sure that you're there at the end. That's not the selling point.
Yeah, at the same time though, it's like hard to like what else what else is his selling point? Like what is honest?
Mm-hmm.
You know? Like I felt like he used the most honest selling point that he could, which was like, hey, I was working down this thing, it didn't work, and I got into a position where I had to win, and I did.
Yeah.
So
well, yeah,
I lasted because these guys would have voted me out 5 times ago, but I won 5 immunities. I mean, obviously they didn't work that way, but you know.
Yeah, well, and I think obviously I would have been more inclined to give him benefit of the doubt there if he hadn't been such a jerk in this episode.
I think everybody would have, but you know, from like his perspective, there's not like you can't say, "Oh, Brad, you should have used X as your strategy." Like he used the right strategy. It just didn't win him the game because of all of the other baggage that came with it, you know?
Yeah. And then Sarah had basically the best possible answer about the idea of why did she betray all these relationships. He's like, because in this game, you need to strike first. You need to vote people out before they vote you out. I put the people on the jury that I thought could potentially beat me.
Yes, I love the ego stroke. Like, but without it sounding forced, you know?
Well, because I think because it's 100% true and she means it sincerely.
Right.
Which helps a lot.
Exactly. So it's so genuine coming from her. Like you hear it from people and they're like, I voted you out because you could have beaten me. But just this whole like, literally you're all there because you could have beaten me. It just, it rang so true from her. I don't know. I mean, this tribal council performance was just, it was really strong.
I agree. I did like Troyzan's sort of final moment there of basically just saying, all right, I'm not the best strategist. I'm not the best game player, but I had a great time being on the show and I like all of you. So thank you. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah. So everyone can applaud for that. And then, and yeah, you get applause. That's your reward. And also, of course, you know, they don't talk about it much, but I think, you know, like everyone who gets into the last little bit gets some amount of money. I think it decreases for how far they get, but, you know, it's like first place is $1 million, but, you know, second place does get something too, so to speak. I don't know why I say so to speak. That doesn't make sense. Anyway, though, we get some of the votes. Michaela votes for Sarah's flawless game and then says that anyone who didn't vote for her is a bitter Betty. And I just love all of her little turns of phrase there. Ozzy votes for Brad, hopes that Brad can do what he's tried to do 4 times. Zeke congratulates Sarah's play. And then Debbie votes Brad in this jaded, crazy world. Good guys finish first.
I don't want to even address what Debbie talks about anymore. I'm done with that. Like,
I think that's my last note about her anyway. All right, so it's time for the votes, and I do have a note that I do not like Brad's mustache. I think his outfit and his mustache made him look like if you were making a period movie about the early 1960s and you had some teenage kids, they were like proto hippies, he would be their square dad. That's what he looked like.
That was where when I said I started to talk about, like, before he made his apology. I feel like, and I'm not saying I agree that this was the best strategy for it, that Brad deliberately made himself look ridiculous because he knew he was coming on to make this apology. Like, so he made himself look like a 50s dad.
Yeah, okay, so I could buy that. That's kind of fun. I like that idea.
Like, that's what it felt like. Like he chose, like, he gave himself the buzz cut, the short sleeve shirt with the tie, and the mustache. Like, it was like, and I don't think he. Sorry, my dog just went fucking ape shit.
Yeah. But yeah, so I like that idea that he was deliberately trying to soften and make his appearance more goofy to be like as a proactive measure against coming across as the mean alpha male, because that was kind of how we last saw him before we switched to the live show. That's interesting. I hadn't considered that purposeful angle, but I think I could believe it. And I kind of hope that's true, because if he really thinks he looks cool like that, I would expect Monica to have a talk with him. Unless, I don't know, maybe she likes it. Maybe that's her preferred style. She likes she likes him to look like that. But so in any case, we get the votes, and Probst tricks us a little bit by switching up the order of the votes the way they would normally do it. It goes Sarah, Brad, and then another Brad vote, which in a lot of the ways that they read the order of the votes, as soon as they start switching to reading one name more than once in a row, it's because all the rest of the votes go to that person. Yep. But then after 2 Brad votes, it's Sarah, and Sarah wins. So it's kind of funny that they mixed up the reading of the order of the votes, though, just to like trip everybody up. Because you could kind of see it on a few faces too, actually. Like there was a little bit of a, like, oh, okay. Yep. And so I don't know. Let's see. I have fewer notes during the reunion show, as is often the case. We have a little bit more Sarah kind of repeating her playing as a criminal rather than a cop. And I loved that she specifically called out playing like Tony, and the idea that they had called each other to talk strategy before going on the season.
Yes, I like that.
Yeah. Oh, and then I guess here is where she elaborated on getting permission from friends and family to do what it takes. And she's proud of how she played, not necessarily how she treated people. And Probst kind of points out, is like, well, I mean, this is a game where you really can't have both, because it's a competitive game and everybody wants to win. So you kind of like, you can't win without having put people out of the game that didn't want to be put out of the game. It's just the way it works. So you could say it's mean, but it's also like, when you run a race, is it mean to the person who finishes second when you run faster than them? No, it's just the game. Although it's certainly complex, we've talked about how there are things that can happen within the context of the game that are not cool, and obviously the whole thing with Zeke and Varner is an example of that.
Which I was glad that seems resolved for the most part.
Yeah. It was kind of funny how Varner forgot to mention his book when they initially talked to him and had to bring it back up at the end.
Yeah.
We also, let's see, before we get to that though, I don't want to skip over the whole bit where Probst really wants to do the hypothetical vote of, well, what if Brad had taken Ty instead of Sarah? And Brad doesn't want to do it. And he brings up all the objections that we always say, which is, it's like, well, when you ask people now, it's a totally different context than what it would have been then.
Right. And then Probst called him like a whiner. Like he
I know. It's like, we're going to do it. What are you complaining about? This is going to happen. And in fact, now that you've objected, I'm going to make an even bigger deal about it. Just because
this is what every tribal council with a Culpepper is like. It was like broad statement that like indicted both him and Monica. Like it was hilarious. Like I mean, it kind of sucked for them, but it was funny. I mean, it was yeah.
What was really interesting though is the discovery that it might have been a 5-5 tie with Ty there. And we discovered that the rule is that if there is a tie, because this is something we've talked about, is when they have an even number of people in the jury, what happens if there's a tie? And it's never really kind of been addressed before, but apparently the rule is that when you have that final three, if it's a tie from the jury, that the person who is, not in the tie gets to cast the last vote. And that's such a cool answer. You know what I mean? Like that's... Right. It's kind of obvious once you hear it, but it's kind of like with when Cirie went out, is like, as soon as you hear the rule, it's like, oh yeah, that seems fair.
Yeah. Which was made more humorous this time because Troyzan tried to vote for Brad when he was, and Jeff's like, no, Troyzan, you're in the final three. Remember, you don't get a vote. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, oh, but now that it's a top Troyzan, you would get that vote.
Yeah.
So, but I call bullshit on the fact that it would have been a 5-5 tie, because what they don't talk about in the show is that all of these people, they're at Ponderosa together, like things are happening, like they understand, like that it's not going to be a 5-5 tie. Like they're going to convince some of those swing votes to go one way or the other before it gets to the final tribal. Like that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I believe.
I believe that they would, there's people who would try to persuade each other, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee that it might not still be a tie.
It doesn't mean there's never going to be a tie. I don't feel like when it's done in this fashion with impulsively, if this person had been there or this person had been there, you voted, because now you're asking Sarah to think, what would she have done had she been in Ponderosa?
Well, and we're also imagining a hypothetical final tribal council that who knows what might have happened at that with a different combination of people.
Right. What does everybody say? How does everybody defend themselves?
Well, but so these are all of the objections that Brad was trying to bring up, and I loved just how playfully Probst was wanting to ignore that. And it's like he's trying to make Brad be haunted by the decision.
It was funny on multiple levels, because on so many levels, as your podcast goes, because he's asking questions that we all ask. Like, why is, this is silly. Like, why are we doing this? And then Probst has a response of like, oh, well, we're going to do it no matter what.
Yeah.
So,
it's like, I'm almost more sure that I want to do it now that you're objecting.
Right. So the amplification was as funny as the actual result. And
well, that's like improv training, and that's actually one of the things that I sometimes struggle with a little bit. Is my instinct in some scenes is to want to solve the problem that has been presented when the better scene is to make it worse. But so in any case, though, we have Zeke and Varner, and Zeke has some great stuff about having the whole experience show him how much that he has so much love in his life, which is great. And he talks about how Survivor got him through depression and finding courage there on the beach. All great stuff. I was a little bit worried when Sarah started talking about like what her family's reaction was going to be, just because I felt like to introduce the idea of negative reactions, even though obviously everyone's aware that that's a possible thing. I kind of didn't want to introduce that energy into the reunion. That's kind of where I was feeling about it, but it's kind of a nice payoff to it, which is that her grandma, the one that she was maybe the most worried about, scolded her for voting Zeke out. That's pretty funny. And then so we have some of the stuff that Zeke's up to, which is all good stuff. And then we have Varner also doing the right thing in terms of owning that what he did was definitely wrong, and he understands it, and he's not like making excuses for it. And and also like when he wants to talk about the ugly reception that he received, he does preface it too, but like I don't want to play the victim, like this isn't my fault, but I can still tell you what's been happening,
he did a good job of being like, yeah, I got fired, and I'm not saying I deserved it, but it happened.
Take it as a learning experience.
And thankfully, a new company has taken me on, and they have accepted me for who I am, and we are moving forward, and I'm so excited. Like, it was all very positive. Like, I was also happy with that too. Like, anything that was out there that was floating that was like potentially negative, like they erased all of it in this arena.
Yeah, it was a really this was one of the better run live reunion shows they've had in a long time, in terms of just everything going really smooth and no kind of awkward moments.
Yeah, I mean, it almost felt like icing over all of the potential awkward moments. They just all covered.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
just your little gesture there, I was suddenly thinking of wax on, wax
on. Yeah.
Then we got a whole bunch of like little mini moments of like, oh, remember that one joke? Are Aubrey and Cochran really a couple? Let's ask them. And they go, no. All right, moving on.
Aubrey's like, yeah, no, I have my same boyfriend that I had before I came on, and I made that joke, and he's okay with it. And they're like, oh.
You mean it was really not a thing at all, and we kind of made as though it was a thing, and when it was obviously kind of a joke? Like, okay, yeah, all right.
All right.
Moving on. Hey, Sandra, is it you play Survivor? And she just said, I liked her attitude. It's like, oh, right, by now it's just a job to me. It's just something that's like, nope, going to work. Going to try to get some paycheck. I like that. I also liked Michaela's good sense of humor about everything. Like, what advice would you give yourself? And she's talking about, being able to respond to different situations with grace, and the joke about checking her stump there on the set for a hidden advantage.
Yep.
That's pretty good. And then talking about like Sierra, like, well, why did you choose to tell Sarah about the legacy advantage, which kind of doomed you and gave Sarah one of her best bits. And it's just like, it came down to trust and vulnerability. And in hindsight, it was maybe not the smartest thing. And then we got Malcolm, which, I think of all the players in this season that went out way too early, and I would have liked wouldn't it have been great if he could have been around longer. I think Malcolm is my number one guy who I wish had managed to stick around longer because he's cool.
For sure.
And it talks about, like, we recover from mistakes, and like the drama is part of why everybody loves it. Everybody cuts away from Ozzy really quick when he tries to take the tribal council discussion to politics. Like everyone's sort of like, all right, let's, brief applause. Let's change the subject. And so then we got the new theme for the next season. And honestly, heroes versus healers versus hustlers. Like, I think that's my favorite new theme in a long time. I feel like it's an even better version of the blue collar, white collar, no collar.
Interesting. Like I was actually very curious to hear your reaction to this, because I know you have.
I have opinions.
You have opinions. While we both have opinions on categorizing people,
mm-hmm.
I have consistently felt like yours are stronger than mine.
Yeah.
If that's a
I think that's fair.
It works. Yeah.
I find the one that, like, at least when I'm objecting to them, I find that I'm usually the one that cares more about it.
Right. And it's not that and maybe there's some that I am more passionate about than you are, but just as a general consensus, I feel like you care more than I do.
Did you not like this one, or are you just you were expecting me?
I thought of it as just anything. I thought you would just be like, well, they've created some just rant, like to the point of your whole description of the outwit, outlast, outplay.
Oh yeah.
Like tribal council, it's like I thought you were just going to be like, oh, they just arbitrarily put some new thing now to differentiate people.
Well, honestly,
that's what
I think,
I was expecting. So I'm glad to hear that you are that this is different, because it's not millennials.
Right. I think just the thing that made me feel a little pleasantly surprised by it is just that it's the first time in a while where I feel like the distinction they're drawing is more meaningful. In the sense of
what D&D looks like. Or,
What?
Like healers,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Which class are you?
Yeah, which class are you? Like I honestly, that's what I felt like when I saw it. Like, or are they just like going
fighters
to
versus clerics versus rogues is definitely a D&D theme that needs to happen.
I mean, that honestly, when they read it off, that was my first impression, was that's what it felt like they were playing to.
Yeah, no, I like that. I actually hadn't drawn that connection in my mind, but I like it.
And maybe why you like them.
Well, yeah, it could be. But like, so
consciously related to it. Yeah.
Like, because I remember liking the blue collar, white collar, no collar concept, but one of the things that was a little wonky about it was just that you had like almost a third of the people there who kind of disputed their own assignment. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
You have people on the no collar who are like, I don't know if I really belong here, or if there are people on the white collars feeling the same way and that sort of thing. Whereas this one, we'll see what the actual cast ends up looking like and what their actual jobs are, to see if there's more of them that are weird in between ones. And like, for example, if you have someone being like a rescue paramedic, like, is that a hero or is that a healer? I guess it would probably be healer, but there are some hero-like qualities to it in terms of the way they're defining the categories. But in general, the idea that there are personality differences between the people who would choose those different categories of job, I feel like is a little bit more of a meaningful delineation than with some of the previous divisions they've chosen.
Yeah, I agree. Even though I make sort of the joke about that, I feel like it's mimicking the classes of art MRP.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Like, I feel like
That
that's
just
kind
makes
of
me like it more.
which is fine. Like
Yeah.
it more for that. I feel like that's kind of what they were going for. They were like, okay,
Mhm.
well, this isn't working. Like, this was kind of silly. Like, well, here's a thing that's popular.
Mhm.
Let's, but in a smart way. Like, they like you said, they didn't make Rogue tank, like strength, like they.
I'm actually suddenly feeling like I really want to run a season of Survivor as a D&D campaign. You could totally do that. I could totally see that happening. It's kind of awesome, actually. Anyway.
All right, you figured that out, but that was my feeling when I got it. And there's something bad about that. Like it
Mhm.
obviously it doesn't disappeal to me. It appeals to you and other people who might be in. I mean, yeah, I think it's great. Like I'm excited about it. So
I don't think disappeal is a word, but I got
I
what you
know,
were going for.
I know, I'm
I
aware
like it,
that
actually. I kind
it's not a
of
word,
disappeal
but
feels like it almost. That's one of those that almost feels like it should be a word because it kind of sounds like disappear, and the meaning is still clear.
yeah, I mean, it appeals to you. It
Mhm.
disappeals to me.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. Whether through the indirect D&D similarity or just in general, I like the idea.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it'll be good. So
yeah. So I think that probably does it. We already had like a long episode here, but we had a lot of stuff to cover, and so yeah, so good stuff. So thank you everybody for watching and/or listening, and we'll be back next season to talk about Survivor Season 35, Heroes versus Healers versus Hustlers, and of course, check out ChristianaEllis.com for all of the other shows that we might do in the meantime.
absolutely.
All right. Good
Good
night,
night.
everybody.